Okay, our speaker today describes herself as a creative maniac. In addition to being a freelance writer promoting conservation and health education, she's also an accomplished painter and cook. So please join me in welcoming Chris Rogers.
Well, good morning. Good morning. Nice to see you all here on this gorgeous, gorgeous day. Okay, here, I want to talk to you about my journey to writing about Lake Minnetonka. Excuse me, I'm trying to get used to the microphone here. Okay. Here we go. Okay, my journey to Lake Minnetonka and 101 things to do on Lake Minnetonka begins in Illinois, through Wisconsin, and finally to Minnesota. Whoops. Now, growing up, my dad instilled a love of travel in myself and my sisters. It is an important part of actually what made me to be a writer and a travel writer. And it was the same for my husband. His family grew up camping, and we went on road trips all the time, going to all the real fun places, kind of the quirky places, places like House on the Rock in Wisconsin, in Illinois or Indiana rather, Santa's Village. And that was our growing up. It was just important for us just to be on the road, and my dad would always take the off the beaten path roads. So we'd go to the rest stops and look for all the brochures to try to find the next place to go, trying to find the most unusual and the most fun. And that's what brought me here and brought me to be a travel writer. Now, as we're traveling, my love of travel came with me into my marriage to my husband. Unfortunately, he's working today, but we like to travel a lot. And what we would do on weekends, we wanted to take day trips. We didn't have a destination. We would just pick a direction and go. And one time, that direction took us northwest on the Mississippi River. And we saw something we never, ever expected to see. And that was the Wisconsin Great River Road. Has anyone driven that road or been on that road? Okay. If not, it's something you should try one day. What we found, our impression, was that, is this Midwest? This is not the Midwest. It was so gorgeous, so unbelievable. It was almost, I would compare it to the mountains out west. It was that breathtaking for us. Now, we grew up in Illinois, my husband in central Illinois, and I lived in a suburb of Chicago. So seeing real beautiful scenery like this was, it wasn't something we saw every day. There's a reason they call us people from Illinois flatlanders, because that's what it is. And I want to put this in context for you about what it was like for us, and also what it was like for us later on when we saw Minnetonka. If you would be in Illinois and you'd look to the left, this is what you'd see. And if you look to the right, that's what you'd see. And if you look straight ahead, that's what you'd see. This was farm country and cornfields and soybeans. That was our wilderness in Illinois. So then you can imagine when we saw this, how much it startled us and how beautiful that was. We thought it was breathtaking. And it was something that actually kind of made us feel small, because you think about the mighty Mississippi carving out these bluffs here. It was just incredible to us. And we would make this frequent road trips. We would look forward just to driving on the road. And it got to be to a point where we thought, this is so beautiful, we have to share this with people. Because a lot of people didn't know it existed. They would just say something. They might know maybe lacrosse, or they might know Prairie du Chien. But the entire Wisconsin Great River Road was something to see. Just beautiful vistas, a very wild place, very different from anything that we had seen before. Because like I said, we were just in areas where state parks were old abandoned strip mines. So to see scenery like this was outstanding for us. So got my husband thinking, what can we do about this? How can we get this message out? And that's when we came across an idea that we had gotten at Door County. Has anyone ever been to Door County before? Yeah, okay. We go on annual family trips. We've been going for over 25 years now, my family. And one thing, if you go to Door County, you'll know there's a lot to do, for one. But if you go to any of the stores, any of the gift shops, things like that, you'll see a book called 101 Things to Do in Door County. So we thought, why can't we do that for the Wisconsin Great River Road? Now, the thing about Door County is that things change a lot. And in their book, they have a lot of businesses and restaurants and attractions, things like that. But things are constantly changing. The one thing that was different about the Wisconsin Great River Road was that there are a lot of landmarks and scenery and things to see. This is a picture here of Maiden Rock, one of the many, many vistas that you could see traveling on the Wisconsin Great River Road. So we realized that we can make a book on this, we could write a book, and we can have a lot of attractions that would always be there. So the book would be kind of something that people could always go back to. And so that came 101 Things to Do in Wisconsin Great River Road. Now this picture here, this is from Wyalusing State Park, which is on the Wisconsin side. But this is what you see here, just all these small little inlets and just a really different area there. Now, when we first came to Minnesota, we weren't on the lake right away. This was 15 years ago. We made our way up here. My husband was transferred. And I saw the ad in a paper for a house for rent. And the ad said, cottage with a lake view. I thought, okay, let's check it out. We did. That's what we saw. And from that moment on, we fell in love. My first words to my husband when we saw this was, honey, get the checkbook. And that became our home on Lake Minnetonka. Even the cat liked it. And when being there, it kind of became the summer home for my family. Now, my family's kind of scattered in California and Florida and in Illinois. But they would come up to our summer home to see our view, and see the cat, and just to enjoy the magic that is Lake Minnetonka. And one year, my mother came up for the first and unfortunately only time. She came up in Thanksgiving. And it was just a cold, dreary, gray Thanksgiving. Just, you know, I almost felt embarrassed because I wanted her to see Lake Minnetonka when everything was green and beautiful. But she saw something in the lake that I didn't even see. Here, I'm looking outside and I'm seeing gray. She's looking out the window at that view, and she's seeing the beauty that is Lake Minnetonka year-round. It doesn't have to be green, you know, that the ice could still be on the lake, but she saw that beauty. And it made me look at it too in a whole different light. The following year, unfortunately, my mother passed. But my mom was such a caring person, and you know, she wanted to make sure that all of us would be taken care of. So she had a little money, and all of my sisters got a little bit. And we thought, you know, we can't use that money for bills. You know, there'll always be bills. I think my mom would have liked it if we would do something special for ourselves. So we did. And we bought ourselves a boat and became boaters. And it only seemed fitting that when we bought the boat, that we should name it the Thanks Mom. Our little boat here, 1972 winter, the only one on the lake. So it's fun for us because people will stop us and tell us their stories about growing up, that this is the boat we grew up on. But we got on the water and we loved it. We fell in love with Lake Minnetonka. There's probably any of you that have been on the water before, you know how special that is. Remember the first time we went boating, we thought, gosh, this is what it's like to be rich. Rich people do this, but no, we had our little boat, our little green boat, and we were, as my brother-in-law would say, in the game, on the water, and it was fun, and we loved it. That got my husband thinking again. Let's tell people about this. You know, local people know it, everybody knows it, and so we just started looking into the possibility of writing a book on Minnetonka. And I thought, well, you know what, I'll just do the same thing I did for the Wisconsin Great River Road. It was a really kind of small book, kind of like a little touristy kind of thing, just listing this and maybe a few little facts. So I started doing some research into the lake. Oh, the stories. Oh, the stories. And talking to people like you, hearing your stories. There is so much history here. And it's unfortunate, I thought, because a lot of the history, the only sign of it is maybe a name of a subdivision, or a name of a road, or a name of a bay. But there's a lot of stories behind all of those names. And that's what became 101 Things to Do on Lake Minnetonka. Now, it turned, as I found out, there was so much to the lake. The history before like the 20th century, and even its founding, or discovery, I should say more correctly. What was interesting to me was that it was kind of a hidden gem. Not a lot of people knew about this. This is back in the day in the 1850s, or 1820s rather. There was rumors that it existed, but it was really difficult to get here at that time. There were the big woods, and there were wetlands. And if you've ever tried to go through those kind of natural areas, it's impossible travel. And it was very difficult, and that's why it stayed hidden. And that was the great thing about it, is that's what kind of protected it. But finally, some English settlers came up the Minnetonka Creek, and this is what they would see. This is the view from Reiss Bay looking out onto the mouth of the creek. And I just can't imagine what it would be like, just you're paddling away in this little creek, because it's not a very big creek, and then you see this. This is what's in front of you. And it had to be astounding. Those people seeing it for the first time had felt the same thing that we do every time we look at it. So that brought the tourists and that brought the people. And what fascinated me about the story of Minnetonka was the early stories. Because there's a lot went on in the early days that we may have not realized how the importance of it was and how it actually changed the lake. So we have all the tourists coming in, and back in the day, it's hard to imagine right now because of how things are, but there were almost 100 steamboats that were on the lake at a time, transporting people around. That's how people traveled around the lake, because you couldn't drive. Well, today too, how long of a drive it is just to go around this lake. And at one time, there were 30 daily trains going to Mound. That's the kind of traffic we're seeing. It was such a destination. It was so fascinating to me that it was like that it became this big attraction for people outside. So they would take their steamboats, and that had to be an excursion in fun of itself, just being able to get on the boat or take the train up to town and then get on these streetcar boats and travel around the lake. And it was interesting to me too that this is how people commuted. If you lived on the lake and you needed to get to the other side of the lake, you would take a streetcar boat or other kind of steamer. If you needed to get a delivery from Dayton's, you'd get that delivery by boat. Just a fascinating thing. But of course, when you have the tourists coming in, you also need to have a way for them to get around. Now, this is a picture here of the Reiss Channel as it was back in the day. Now, the thing it is, at one time, the lakes were pretty much, I wouldn't say separated, but just about as separated as they could be, the upper and lower lakes. And the only way they could get through was this channel. Finally, it started out as a smaller channel. You could still see the remnants of it right next to the Reiss Channel that we see today. But when this was dredged out in 1883, it totally changed the lake, totally. And it was almost like the little rivalry too between towns like Mound and Excelsior. This side of the lake, the upper lake, it billed itself as being the quiet side. This is where you come to get away. It was the escape, away from all the hustle and bustle and the fancy hotels and things like that. And then you had the fancier hotels that were in the lower lake. But this is a really important thing at the time. And back in the day, when this was first created, cars would have to ferry across this channel. So imagine this, you had to get in line, and then it was a 25-foot ferry, so maybe just two cars at a time two cars going through at a time. Probably wasn't the best way to travel. Water was the way to travel. So you have a lot of, the hotel industry just blossomed in this area. So this is a picture here of the Samson House, the former Slater House. This was the last of the original hotels in Excelsior. It closed in 1960 and then became, I believe, private residence in 1961. But this is how they build Lake Minnetonka here, is a sportsman paradise. As you can see, that's a pretty darn good catch there. Didn't have, no problems at all with the fishing here at the time. But that wasn't always the case as far as all these hotels doing very well, though it was booming for a long time. There were other hotels like this one here, the Donaldson House. This is more of an example of maybe of what was happening at the time, that hotels often changed hands several times. This particular hotel changed hands 6 times. It was around from 1875 to 1913, and that was just the way of it. You know, a lot of the businesses here today, they were dependent on the weather, maybe dependent on the fishing too, and that was their livelihood. And unfortunately, you know, it was a tough industry at the time. But of course, we can't talk about the hotels without talking about the granddaddy of them all, the Hotel Lafayette. This was James Hill's opus, this 300-room hotel. And then here in the foreground, you could see the Belle of Minnetonka, 2,500 passenger boat that would sail the lake. Unfortunately, its history was short-lived. And it's kind of interesting that James Hill actually brought about maybe his own downfall. By opening up the railroad out west, Minnetonka wasn't the destination anymore because there were other things to see. Go out west, see Yellowstone and Yosemite, the national parks that were opening up. And it wasn't long before the hotel industry started to suffer, and the big ones, unfortunately, went first. Now, with the Hotel Lafayette, of course, you have something maybe a suspicious story with this, that the hotel mysteriously burned down in 1887 after it had been doing poorly for several years prior to that. Prior to it also, the bell wasn't on the water. So the handwriting was on the wall that something was going to happen. And that was probably another interesting side note. I'm not familiar with other areas, but it seemed to me there were an awful lot of hotel fires around here. But the interesting thing about the Hotel Lafayette, though, is that at the same time, I think within 5 years, another great hotel opened up, and that was the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island. Here's a picture of it today. This is what maybe the Hotel Lafayette might have been like had it survived. Now, this hotel is in the National Register of Historic Places, about the same size as the Hotel Lafayette, 390 rooms, and over 130,000 people visit it each year. What would that have been like had the Hotel Lafayette survived? Wouldn't that have been neat? That would have been something. What a showcase it would have been. But what's also interesting in doing my research on the lake was all the historic homes out here. This is the Thompson Summer House. This is also on the National Register of Historic Places. This is an example, one of the last examples of a summer home from back in the heyday in the 1880s to 1890s. And from what I'm told, it is not modernized or not, it doesn't have electricity in it. So it's just the summer house as it would have been at the time. And then you also have places here like the Burwell House in Minnetonka. Just gorgeous houses from back in the day. There's also the Wire Pierce House in Excelsior too. That's on the National Register of Historic Places. So there's a lot of value that people saw here. And it was just, it's hard to kind of maybe get our head around what it was like and how different and exciting this area was at the time. And still is, I'd say. And then also we have a lot of innovators in the past. A picture here of the Commons area, Excelsior Commons. That land was set aside in 1853 by Charles Galpin and other settlers in Excelsior. And how special is that we have that area today? I mean, think about it. I was talking to a woman earlier today saying that when she came here, they bought land, what was 150 feet of shoreline for $3,000. And you know what that would be today. And it's just amazing to me that we have this, that there's an area that you could still get to the lake and be around the lake and enjoy the lake. Now, Galpin, of course, was a very interesting man of himself. The Lake Galpin is named after him. He ran the first steamboat on the lake, the Governor Ramsey, and he also had the first hotel in Excelsior, called the Donaldson House. But then, of course, when we talk about this area, we also have to talk about apples, of course, and Peter Gideon. Now, Peter Gideon was always somebody that was into horticulture, and his idea was to bring the first winter hardy apples to try to produce those. It's hard to believe now when we have all these wonderful apples coming out of University of Minnesota, but this is where it started with Peter Gideon. Peter Gideon took him 10 years and 350 trees before he finally came up with his wealthy apple, which he named after his wife. And we had later other horticulturists also got into the game too. We had Charles Harrelson with the Harrelson apple, from roots from Peter Gideon. But of course, we still enjoy Minnetonka in the same kind of ways as people always have done. We love to be outside in the water, to enjoy the water for what it is. You don't necessarily have to have a boat, and just go swimming and get into the game. We also have some more sophisticated ways of enjoying the lake. But nevertheless, we all really adore Minnetonka, and it's easy. It's easy to fall in love. And of course, the one wonderful, wonderful thing about Minnetonka is you can enjoy it year-round. There's always something to see, always. And it's beautiful every season of the year. This is a picture here of Excelsior. Excelsior is like our second home. We're always there. It just feels like home. And of course, there's the water. And just enjoying being on the water, seeing the water. Excuse me. What's interesting about it, there's not a bad view. No matter where you go, there's not a bad view. I took this picture just walking the Dakota Trail, going across the bridge, the Arcola Bridge. There's always something to see, and it's captivating. And I think back to my mother and her just staring out the window. That's what we do. We just stare out the window and enjoy the view. Now, this is one of our favorite places, Tanager Lake. What's really interesting about the lake, when you get to know it, is that every bay is different. The experience in every single bay, it's just not the same. Now, this one here, Tanager, I don't know if you're familiar with it, it's by the marina off of 15, North Shore Marina. This is like a small lake that you might drive to going up north, something like that. It's just a real quiet lake, not very big, very beautiful, and not many houses around it. So I think from what I read, it's less than 16 houses. So it's a little different than other places around the lake because you get more of the real lake experience. Compare that to other lakes, Wayzata Bay. I don't think I've ever boated in Wayzata Bay where there weren't whitecaps. That's just the kind of a bay that one is. And we have our favorite bays. I'm sure everybody does. One of our favorite pastimes is just finding these little places, and we toss out an anchor and we'll just sit and read and just swim and pass the day. One of our favorite places to go is Carson Bay. Carson Bay, we have our own name for it. We call it Tranquility Bay because it's quiet. It's a lot of it's no wake, so we could sit there and enjoy it. And we actually have nicknames for a lot of bays around the lake. Halstead Bay was also one of our favorite bays. But unfortunately, it seems people who like to go tubing like that bay as well. And I don't know what it is about our boat, but it seems to attract the tubers going around and around and around. Our nickname for that bay is Buzz Bayou. And we have other places that we like to go a lot, but that's just the thing. Like I said, it's a different experience every time. And that kind of motivates us to what we're going to do when we go on the water. What kind of experience do we want? And you could find it on Minnetonka. And the wonderful thing about it, too, is that you can enjoy it year-round. I don't know if I would be out paddleboarding like that, but the fall colors are astounding. If you see this from the water, my gosh, it's just wonderful. It's to experience it in a whole new light is to see the fall colors on the water. And you can also enjoy the lake's different events. One of our favorite events is the Classic Boat Show. Wonderful opportunity to see the grand boats out here. And how interesting is that too? In fall, it seems that a lot of the classic boats come out. Maybe they just are not out on the water at the right time, but fall seems to be the time where all these wooden boats are out touring around. And to me, that is the epitome of a boat right there, is these old Chris Crafts. We had a wonderful experience one time. I'm not sure where this boat was at. I think he was docked on Priest Bay. But there was a boat owner out there that had a 20-foot runabout, just an incredible boat, Chris Craft. And we always admired this boat from afar. And I was so surprised one day when this man driving around, he would always seem to want to go through our bay, just zip around, and then just go out just to enjoy the breeze, or just the wonderful feel of being in that kind of a boat. And one time he pulled by us and asked us about our boat. I thought, wow, you want to know about my boat? That's an incredible experience. But the thing with Minnetonka too is you can join in the winter. And that's what makes it so special. That's the one thing that we learned coming from Illinois, is that Minnesotans, we embrace winter. In fact, we're upset if there's not ice on the lake, whether or not it's thin or not, or safe or not. But that's the wonderful thing, is just to embrace the seasons. And the things that was the best lesson I think we've gotten from being on the lake, is that it's wonderful all the time. And the thing about Minnetonka too is that it's always changing. Things, one year you might have low waters and boating will be a little tough, or sometimes there'll be floods. It's just always changing. You can never predict. But the one thing you can rely on with Lake Minnetonka is that there'll always be a great view. This is a view here looking from the library, the Wayzata Library. I was astounded that you could have a view like this from a library. Wow. Makes it worth going over there, get a few books, and just go sit there and enjoy your view all day long. And that's what we love about Minnetonka, isn't it? There's something for everybody. It's always got something to share.